regard to the MOU, there was strident efforts to make it appear that the MOU was not what the paper was written on, because the MOU, what it effectively did, it said that the assets of CL Financial, which is the holding company, which will include CLICO and all its 60-something subsidiary companies, would be held by the government until CL Financial had paid off the statutory fund. So I don't know why they would think that that was something that would benefit CL Financial, because it was a benefit, I think, to the government. And if you have any question as to the impact of the MOU, there are two things I could see. One of them is that same meeting, the day after Mr. Dupree signed the MOU, as the 31st of January 2009, he had a meeting with members of his executive directors, the board of directors. And this is a verbatim. I'm not interpreting what was said. I'm actually saying what was said. And I start with, it was felt by all members that nothing in the MOU favored the CLF group. The MOU was specifically designed to destroy the company rather than protect its assets. The chairman's sick, well, probably some error in the grammar, choice was questioned, as was his choice of legal advisors, which members felt were acting for Stone Street, which is Andre Montai, rather than CLF. The MOU was designed to give government control of CLICO, where most of the assets of value reside. After much hesitation and deliberation, members reluctantly agreed to sign the resolution to approve the MOU, which was signed previously by the chairman on Friday, January 30th, 2009. The next meeting they had, again, talking about the impact of the MOU. At the February 5th meeting, the following was recorded. Following the board's view at the last meeting that the MOU was negotiated on CLF's behalf by Stone Street Capital was not in CLF's interest, members of the board felt that it was imperative that there be no further or future engagement of Stone Street, its principals or advisors. The chairman informed the meeting that in his letter to Central Bank, he requested a line of credit for CLICO. Instead, the Central Bank and MOF and GORT took this request, and following meetings and discussions, had taken control of the financial companies within the group. The chairman acknowledged that the negotiation leading to the MOU did not go as planned, and so on. So you have his view. That is the CLF executive, none other than Mr. Dupree, saying what he thought the MOU did, which I think is pretty accurate. The other thing that you have to tell you, the effect of the MOU was the Court of Appeal decision in the Proman case, because in the MOU, one of the things that was required by Clause 20 was that CLF Group was to give a list of all the assets that they owned, whether those assets were encumbered or not, the extent of the encumbrance and the value of those assets, and that they were not to sell any of those assets without first obtaining the approval of the government. That was Clause 20 of the MOU. What happened in that case was that, I'm trying to look for the judgment. It's on, so what happened in that case was on February the 4th, I believe, which is a few days after the MOU was signed, Mr. Dupree entered into an agreement, a shareholders agreement of 2009, to sell the shares of which CLICO and CLF together, 37% and 14%, totaling 51%, to sell those shares to Proman. And he was selling it them at a gross undervalue. So the court also held a $46.5 million. He did it without allowing the government to know, number one, that he was selling those shares. He made no disclosure to the government.
This would have been a clear breach of the MOU.
Absolutely. So what happened was, when we discovered, and I think it's in the report because I was trying to look for it, but I'm sure someone will find it. I mean, I think that was really bad. When Mr. Dupree, I think in response to the PS, or perhaps to me, I can't recall, he went to pains to say that they were accepting the provisions of the MOU, that they would provide the government with a schedule of all the assets that they owned and the value of those assets. He clearly gave that undertaking in writing. But in the meantime, he and Gita Sakal together, from what I read in the report also, met with Mr. Cassidy of Proman and sold the shares. And the High Court, who first heard the matter before it went to the Court of Appeal, determined that the sale of the shares to Proman was in breach of Clause 20 of the MOU. So clearly, what you want to really affect the MOU. That is why today you can read that the government was able to sell to Proman those very same shares which they had to give back to TL Financial, which is still the government, and at 150 billion US dollars. That is what they paid for those shares. I think just a week ago or less. But the High Court heard the matter, and they said that this is in 2022. They went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal said what I just said, the facts that I gave to you. But this is the point that I want to make about the effect of the MOU. And this is quoting from the Court of Appeal. These are not my words. This is the Court of Appeal stating this. The Court of Appeal stated, quote, that it seems clear that Dupree, prior to the MOU and the matters raised therein and the intervention of GORT, the government, had extensive powers to the extent that Proman could legitimately rely on his say-so alone to represent the will and actions of CLF and its subsidiaries. They went on to say again, without the MOU, Mr. Dupree could have done what he wanted and would not be liable for the fraudulent sale of the Proman shares in breach of the express provisions of the MOU. So when people ask you what was the MOU about, well, you have two examples. One, the chairman himself saying that the MOU gave government control of his assets. And that's probably why he went on the 4th of February after saying that he didn't know what he was going to do. He knew what he was going to do because he went a few days afterwards with Mr. Carl and sold it to Mr. Cassidy. And when it went to the Court of Appeal, the difference between the Court of Appeal and the High Court was they both agreed that the MOU prevented Mr. Dupree from doing what he wanted. And the issue of Mr. Dupree having what they call ostensible authority, meaning that, yes, when you make decisions, it's supposed to be the board. But if you read the report, particularly statements of Mr. Caballo, what you do know is that decisions were made by Mr. Dupree.